Today's MAX covers environmental law for engineers. I'll start by reviewing the recommendations from Engineers Canada for all engineers regarding environmental and sustainability issues. Professional engineers are expected to understand what is available currently in terms of environmental and sustainability issues in their field of expertise. But they aren't expected to become experts. They can make use of expertise available. They need to ensure that they understand how to plan for and manage environmental issues in any project they do, and make sure that they cover the costs of these when planning and executing a project. Part of this includes being aware that there is actually a value to ensuring environmental efficiency and sustainability when thinking about the full life cycle of materials and services. In terms of ensuring that all the stakeholders involved in the environmental and sustainability issues are included, this is explicitly mentioned by Engineers Canada's recommendations. There are clearly a growing number of regulatory requirements around environmental stewardship and sustainability, which obviously professional engineers are required to keep up with. And because of engineers' roles in society, it's important that we maintain our understanding of the environment and improve our knowledge of how to implement best practice. So as I said earlier, Engineers Canada isn't asking that all of us become environmental specialists. However, we need to know what we don't know. We need to have enough knowledge to know when we need to call in an expert and in order to work out what the best way forward is. And because of our responsibility to society, it's reasonable that society would expect us to actually anticipate some environmental problems that perhaps in the past we as a profession haven't been that good at anticipating. A lot of environmental law for engineers currently resides in the fields of civil engineering. However, any process manufacturing or otherwise that requires suitable handling of chemicals could also enter into this. And in practice, we should be thinking beyond the legal constraints as to what are suitable approaches for sustainability of anything that we design or develop, whether it's a product or a service. Environmental law in Canada is shared between the federal government and the provinces. At a federal level, the main legislation is the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, which aims to prevent pollution. There are a number of acts that then support this around fishing, handling dangerous goods, preventing pollution, particularly in the Arctic, and so on and so forth. The Environmental Protection Act is provincial legislation, as is the Environmental Bill of Rights. So at the provincial level, the Ministry of Environment is responsible for enacting the Environmental Protection Act, and basically it identifies a number of concepts around environmental protection. Who owns the contaminant that could affect the environment, how you are expected to care for and control that contaminant, what constitutes a spill or a discharge of that contaminant, how you're meant to prevent it or report cases where it may have been discharged, what the adverse effects could be, and how to ensure against discharge and generally report the successful care and control of any contaminant. In terms of legal precedents, environmental precedent actually goes back longer than many people might think. The initial case on which a lot of new law is founded is Rylands v. Fletcher. Rylands wanted a reservoir built on his land, and he employed some contractors that he basically had no technical control over. The contractors discovered some coal shafts in the process of building the reservoir, they didn't properly block them up. When the reservoir was first used, it burst and flooded a mine run by somebody called Fletcher, causing quite significant damage. And at the time, the court's argument was that the water that Rylands had brought onto his land was a nuisance, and it had effectively trespassed on Fletcher's land. And so Rylands was deemed responsible for all the damage which resulted from his bringing that water onto his land. The case was slightly more nuanced in 2011, fairly recently. In Canada, the case of Smith versus Inco consisted of a nickel refinery that had been in operation for many, many years. The town where the nickel refinery was had house prices that were not as high as elsewhere. And so Smith pursued Inco to try and get compensation for the fact that the house prices hadn't improved. So in this case, what the court was really looking at was, did the nuisance that Inco was causing constitute environmental damage that could be pursued under the courts? So in the original Rylands v. Fletcher case, there were basically 4 steps that were required to be checked. Was the use of the property natural? Was it in any way dangerous? Did the dangerous material escape? And did that escape cause some sort of damage? And so, considering Smith versus Inco, the concept of natural use was more nuanced into appropriate use. So the nickel was naturally in the ground, the smelting is not a natural use, but it is appropriate. Nickel itself isn't actually dangerous, nor is the way it's being smelted. This was a perception by society, but it isn't actually founded in fact. So said the courts. In terms of material escape, there was not one single escape like in the Fletcher case. However, the courts agreed that if you have a number of small escapes, that can be the same as one large escape, provided those escapes are accidental and not intentional. So in the case of nickel smelting, the intention was to extract the nickel. The nickel is naturally forming, so there was no accidental release of nickel into the soil, it was naturally present. And in terms of damage, there was no direct damage. The fact that house prices may have been lower in the area was not seen as a consequence of damage, and so Inco actually won in appeal. The nickel mine didn't meet the 4 conditions. Thinking internationally, a lot of you have probably heard about the Kyoto Protocol. This was a global protocol where Canada had agreed to reduce its emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases significantly. However, under the last government, Canada started backing away from the Kyoto targets and formally started withdrawal in 2011. At the beginning of the new government, there was the new Paris Agreement that doesn't have legal binding. However, governments worldwide have now signed up to very new, tough restrictions on emissions going forward. However, there's a long way to go. So the key to all environmental issues is actually to look at a thing called the life cycle analysis, to look at the entirety of the product or service that's being developed and determine where the environment is being burdened by it. So this includes use of energy, use of facilities, use of materials, thinking about how to ensure that the extraction, production, transportation and reuse and disposal are all considered in the life cycle of a product, not just the pieces where industry is actually directly involved. And there are ways to change material and process choices and manufacturing processes to actually change that life cycle.